Good morning, everyone. We're gonna get started. Yeah, no, that's great. I love all the chit chat. This is part of the reason why we're gathered is in order to connect with each other. We all have a lot of knowledge and experience in our different communities that can be shared with others. So please talk to your neighbors, ask them about what they're doing, ask them about projects they're working on and what they're excited about. We'll have more time to chit chat over lunch and in between some of the sessions. But I am going to get started with just an introduction on what the Regional Housing Partnership is and who am I? So my name is Emily Petz, and I am a co-lead for the Regional Housing Partnership. Let's see. So I have been working in housing for about 15 years. Previously, I had the privilege of working for the Michigan State Housing Development Authority and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So I have experience with kind of federal and state financing to fill gaps in different economic and community development projects across the state. And I'm very excited to now, for the last 3 years, I've been working with the Upjohn Institute. And when we had the opportunity to be a lead for the Regional Housing Partnership, we knew this was a good fit for our team and for our level of expertise. So yeah, so I'm gonna get to it and talk a little bit about the RHP and how we got here today.
Maybe. Now try.
There we go. So, welcome. We're just getting started. You haven't missed much. I'm glad you're here safely. For those of you on Zoom, there was a bit of a backlog on the highway due to an accident. So we're fortunate that everyone is getting here safe and sound from their highway adventure. So the Regional Housing Partnership, this is hosted by Region J. So Region J is composed of local governments, nonprofits, developers, different organizations, foundations, basically anyone who wanted to participate, anyone who has a passion in housing can be a part of the Regional Housing Partnership. It's broken into 4 different working groups. So we have unhoused and equity, housing ecosystem, housing stock, older adult housing. And then our steering committee is composed of the chairs. So we have 2 chairs in each of those working groups. The steering committee is composed of those chairs. We have LISC, Kalamazoo, and then our partners, Southwest Michigan Planning Council. So those counties that we cover, there's 7 in total. It's Berrien, Branch, Calhoun, Cass, Kalamazoo, St. Joseph, and Van Buren counties. And the leads, so just a little bit more about, if you haven't heard of the Upjohn Institute, real quick, it's a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan, independent research organization that is devoted to investigating the causes and effects of unemployment. And obviously, community and economic development are very much tied to employment and business retention and economic development. So they have been working in a regional community development team for some time, which is where this work lives and where I reside. ISK is our co-chair, our co-lead, and they are our community and mental health services that service the entire region. So the same counties that we service as a RHP, they service for their medical benefits and management throughout the region for the Michigan behavioral health. And a little bit about our timeline. So how did we get here? How did this start? Why are we a regional housing partnership? So this all started when MISTA created their statewide housing plan in 2022. There's a sample of their housing plan in the back on one of the tables if you would like to take a look at that high-level summary. But ultimately, MISTA wanted to make sure that their housing plan was actionable and living and breathing and moving forward. And so they created this regional housing partnership model. So they divided the state into, I think there's also a map in the back, into all of these regions. And essentially, asked the regions to create their own action plan. And that's what we did. So in June, with MISHDA kicking us off, in June of 2023, we met with around 60 stakeholders and just started to talk about, okay, how do we want to organize? How do we want to have our action plan represent our region? And once we kind of decided, okay, we're going to have these working groups and this is how the steering committee is going to work, we then focused on, okay, how do we prioritize the different goals and strategies within that plan? So we worked on that until about September of 2023, where we did the public engagement process and then finalized the plan for MISHDA. And this was MISHDA's timeline. They wanted the plan by September so they could make some decisions for their October funding year. So we met our MISHDA deadline and it felt a little rushed, but we were happy to have that plan. And so in order to make sure we were all on the same page and that we had clear directive of how to implement this plan, we then created work plans. And these work plans is what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. The work plans drive into more of the specifics of how we're going to reach some of the goals we've set for ourselves and specific strategies and action items, and made everything a bit more tangible. We also organized our plan in tiers. So we have tier 1 goals and tier 2 goals, because it all felt very overwhelming at first when we have 18 different strategies under 10 different goals, and we can't do all the things all at once. So acknowledging that and recognizing that we're going to start with these first tier goals, and then as those are underway and manageable, then we'll move forward with those second tier goals. So in April of 2024 is when we really started putting the plan into action. We had our first workshop in partnership with MSU Extension. MSU Extension combined some trainings that they had for us to incorporate the best practices in zoning to get more diverse housing options, and then included some of the history of exclusionary zoning practices in zoning to create this all-encompassing, how do we make sure we're serving everyone in our communities and creating enough housing options and equity in the housing realm. And that happened throughout our region throughout the spring of 2024. And then the next large event that I have is our in-person meeting in September, where our working groups met and the counties met. The counties did a SWOT analysis. Our working groups met to touch base on their work plans and say, hey, are these goals still in alignment? What do we need to change? And does this plan still look accurate for our region? So that was in September. We had that kind of touch base. But moving forward, those 4 working groups meet quarterly to connect on these different objectives that I'm going to talk about today. And actually, at our September meeting, we also kind of made it similar to this, where we had training available. We had MISHDA and MEDC participate at that last September meeting as well. So the action plan is a bit heavy. I'm not expecting you to read this. Very detailed. So we really, we had 10 different goals, 18 different strategies. We have around 80 members in our 4 different working groups. Some working groups are, a little smaller, a little larger, but around 20 to 25 people in each working group. If you are interested in a working group, anyone is welcome to participate. So here's just kind of a quick highlight of just an example of what the working plans look like. So we keep track of where and who is doing what, and then we make notes if we find information that maybe is, important for moving that goal forward. Sometimes we find, and with some examples, with some goals, we have actually found that the actions we have laid out, once talking to some experts in the field, weren't actually as helpful as we had hoped, and we kind of, scratch and then redesign. I think we've only had to do that with one of our goals, but ultimately, we're talking to the experts in the field and making sure that we're truly being helpful to remove the barriers that we have identified as a working group and help to see more housing in the regions that are working towards it. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about these work plans. I'm just going to go over some of the more exciting and top goals for each of these working groups. And you'll notice that there is some overlap. So when we were working with the groups, we noticed a lot of the groups had similar concerns or were interested in similar initiatives that they saw throughout the state. And they were like, oh, we want to do that too. So there's a few strategies that are shared between working groups. The first one I want to talk about is our housing stock working group. So their first goal is to increase the supply of full spectrum housing that is affordable and attainable to Michigan residents. And we were lucky enough to partner with Kalamazoo LISC to help us move forward this particular goal. So when we talk about barriers to creating more housing, funding is a huge piece of that barrier. So this working group is very concerned about, okay, who has access to funding, what funding is available, and is it flexible enough and patient enough to see a project through. And that's ultimately what a revolving loan fund is built to do. It's built to have a little bit lower interest, to be more patient, to work with newer developers. And once a project is funded and loaned, it can be recycled through the collection of the repayment. So it builds over time. It starts out small, but as we add more projects and add more fund and capitalization, we can continue to have something that is sustainable long-term to continue to fill gaps within housing projects. So LISC Kalamazoo is focusing on, the first one was started in Battle Creek, and then they're working diligently on the one in Kalamazoo, and will expand to other counties as those become, as we're ready with capacity. So the idea would be that we would be able to provide a revolving loan fund. A dream would be we would have a revolving loan fund in every county. We also have LISC Kalamazoo, our partner, is helping with this AmeriCorps membership. So one of the other topics that came up during the working group conversations is that there's a lot of barriers to see the development in communities. And that can be for many of reasons, but ultimately there's this kind of pre-development phase that gets a little sticky for developers as far as the zoning requirements or the different reviews that are needed in order to get to that, construction date. And a lot of those barriers are addressed in the Redevelopment Ready Community Program and MEDC. So instead of reinventing a wheel, we wanted to kind of accent and help movements and initiatives that were already taking place. So MEDC's Redevelopment Ready Community Program is focused on being redevelopment ready. It's a community and economic development tool that helps municipalities essentially streamline and clean up their processes so that they're ready and they're being proactive about the development they want to see. Versus waiting for developers to come up, they're saying, hey, we've cleaned up our processes, we've streamlined it for you, it's going to be smooth, it'll be very clear and predictable for you. And that removes a lot of barriers for developers. So this RRC program, a lot of communities are already engaged in it, but they have limited capacity to move forward on some of those to-do lists to be certified. So we worked with LISC Kalamazoo to establish AmeriCorps positions to help move some of those communities forward. So it's a pilot program. We've never used AmeriCorps positions in this way before. This will be kind of a test to see how it goes. But these will be full-time positions. We have 3 counties. We're super excited to announce that we have 3 counties that have accepted and will be hosting AmeriCorps members. So we have Kalamazoo County, and then Berrien, Cornerstone Alliance in Berrien is hosting the second, and then Van Buren County is hosting the third. And they will work with specific communities to help remove those barriers and add in capacity to assist and get more communities RRC certified. So we're super excited about that program. They're actually still hiring. So if you know anyone in Berrien County that might be interested, I think Cornerstone Alliance is still in their hiring and review process. So let me know if you have someone that you think might be a good fit for this job. So also with our housing stock, their second goal is to increase the rehabilitation and or preservation of housing stock. There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways you can do this. But ultimately, the group talked a lot about how do we get more rehab of our existing housing stock. We have older housing stock in the state of Michigan. We have a lot of seniors that reside in older homes. How do we help renovate? And kind of the natural solution was to think about how do we use existing funding. So right now, and why we've had our second presentation today is from MSHDA, because MSHDA has allocated dollars for the My Neighborhood program to our region to remove housing barriers. And one of the funding sources is CDBG funding. And this CDBG funding can be used for homeowner rehab. And so we have $8 million in our region that is still uncommitted in CDBG dollars. And so the working group decided that this was a barrier that we wanted to focus on and remove. So we worked with MSHDA and had a homeowner rehab training available. We've also created a peer-to-peer sharing group. So if you are running a CDBG program with MSHDA and you just want a friend, someone else, or ask, who did you do? This example right here is lead testing, right? So how did you handle this? Or who would you recommend? Just having that person on hand so you're not doing it alone. That's what this peer-to-peer group is for, to remove some of the barriers to applying and running a program, which can be a little intimidating at first if you're not used to that particular program. So these were all kind of tangible steps that this group decided was important in order to remove barriers, provide more education around how do we develop and rehabilitate more housing. That also included the support and education around the benefits of land banks, which we're going to talk about later today. Land banks are a pivotal point in making sure that we have the tools we needed in our community to preserve and rehabilitate and create more housing opportunity for our constituents. And I think this is the last one for this working group, but their third goal is to increase missing middle and workforce housing stock to facilitate greater housing choice. And that's where our presentation on land banks our community land trust comes in today. They really saw these three pieces. So you can thank the housing stock work group for the agenda today. They really saw the CDBG education, the community land trust education, and the land bank education as vital components to removing barriers and creating more of the housing that we would like to see for our hardworking families. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this because we have experts coming in later today, but ultimately a community land trust is a way to provide long-term affordability for your community. And it's designed to be that entry-level home, that first-time home buyer. There's a shared equity model, and it's managed by a nonprofit that will then resell the home to another affordable homeowner, another first-time affordable homeowner. So the other working groups don't have. They won't be as long as in-depth, but this next one, housing ecosystem, they have a few things cooking up here. So their goal was to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of housing ecosystems by enhancing collaboration on housing between philanthropy, local governments, tribal nations, education, and a wide variety of private sector organizations. So they also were concerned about this idea of how do we shorten the process from permit application to occupancy and development. It was, so a similar concern to what the housing stock group had. And we are utilizing that RRC AmeriCorps program to meet and address some of those concerns from this working group as well. This working group, as well as our older adult working group, both had conversations around a housing agency. And so we are going to be starting, housing agency education this quarter, and ultimately, and partnering with the Michigan Office of Rural Prosperity. So the Michigan Office of Rural Prosperity is going to be working with us to create asset maps of our regional housing system. Super excited. And they also have been working with other regions around this conversation of what makes up a housing agency? How will it work? What do we want them to do? Where do they start? And they are going to be providing a written outline to different organizational structures that we see across the state, as well as a recorded presentation on some of the existing housing agencies in our state. So we have quite a few. I put a few of the logos up here. You may have heard of Housing North or Housing Next, Wupperter, Housing Forwards in Midland. So this is something that's happening across the state, is people are feeling that there's a need for these housing agencies, that there's something missing. And I think they're set up a little differently in each one to accommodate those regional needs. And that's the conversation and education that we're going to get started. What makes sense for our region? We don't know yet. We're going to figure it out. And luckily we have the partnership of the Rural Prosperity, who has these expertise and has been working with these other regions to help guide those conversations for us and get us started. So we joined their Rural Readiness Network, and there's a lot of benefits to that partnership that we're excited about. And yes, so the second goal for Housing Ecosystem Work Group is really focused on how do we expand our construction workforce. They were very passionate about this pinch that developers are feeling with having enough contractors to do the work. And realizing that this pipeline of contractors has kind of been ignored. Since 2008, we have been slower to develop and are a bit backlogged, but we also lost a lot of our contractors in 2008. They went to other states where they could find work. And so we're a bit behind, we have gaps missing in our pipeline that we need to investigate. So this working group was very interested in how do we increase the individuals in apprenticeship programs that even want to become certified, and how do we increase those underrepresented in the construction business in general? How do we just increase these numbers? What's happening here? And we kind of weren't sure where to plug in and how to best fill this gap. And so we ended up deciding that we would start with the assessment of the construction workforce contractor pipeline. And that assessment would be completed by the Upjohn Institute to dive into some of these details. So the Upjohn team will focus on 3 different elements. Who's recently completed construction training program at a secondary or post-secondary level, who's working in construction occupations, who may have interest in becoming a contractor, what existing contractors may be interested in growing their business, and ultimately, how do these construction industries develop skills to create businesses and grow businesses? And all of this is key information to identifying ways in which we can improve the overall construction pipeline. Because right now we just don't know what we don't know. And that's what we're hoping this report will piece together for us. The report was started for Kalamazoo and Calhoun County, and we will be submitting an application to MSHDA to get additional funding to do this work for the rest of the region. So we'll cover all 7 counties will have this information. So super excited about that one as well. So our older adult working group is probably our smallest working group. They have a few overlapping objectives. Ultimately, their goal is to equitably expand the supply of affordable and accessible rental units statewide for older adults. We had a lot of conversations about seniors and living in their homes. They own their homes, maybe, and ultimately there's a larger population that have fixed incomes. So if anything happens to their home, they're a particularly vulnerable situation. So this group also felt it was important to kind of expand those resources and tools around the CDBG funding. How do we get more homeowner rehab dollars available to our region? They also were interested in this regional housing agency objective and will be participating in those conversations as well. They are working on creating a senior housing development guide for municipalities to kind of demystify and clarify some of the challenges that developers face when trying to construct senior housing. The Unhoused and Equity Working Group, so this is our last working group. They were actually our first, they checked off our first goal. So they have been diligently working on actually creating new goals. So we're actually meeting in April in person to add to the strategies under some of their existing goals. But ultimately, the work that we did with MSU Extension, where we held 3 different workshops on housing equity best practices, was the initiative of the Unhoused and Equity Working Group. This working group had great success in that event. We had a lot of positive feedback. It was located in 3 different counties throughout our region. They also have a lot of advocacy concerns and passion. And so as a nonprofit, nonpartisan, I can't lead this group, but we have found others within the Regional Housing Partnership to provide this policy advocacy group support. And that's still kind of in its beta phase. That is my summary of all we've been cooking up in the RHP. I am happy to elaborate, or if you really want to see our work plans, I'm happy to share those as well. If you are interested in joining, we'd love to have you participate in our quarterly meetings for any one of the working groups. We do have people who are just on our general listserv. So our general listserv is just for the updates. So anytime there's a training about housing, or a free training or a workshop or funding that we hear about, I will send that out to the RHP and let them know about it, and I will send it out to the general listserv. So if that's something you want to stay in the loop about, please let me know, and I'll happily get you connected to our general updates if you don't have time for a working group.